Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see you. Thank you very, very much indeed for coming to what some people have thought is going to be a technical day. Oh, it's for technical people. And they run away. And so it's a very select group today. Thank you very, very much indeed for coming, and I hope you'll enjoy it. As far as some technicalities are concerned, there are probably one or two technicalities that are quite helpful to know about. Some of you will obviously, but and this one starts from the very beginning. Anything that might be technical becomes horribly complicated. So when we talk about the musical scale, we have an interval of a third, 1, 2, 3, and an interval of a fifth, 4, 5. And then we have octave. And so if I talk about a third, or any of us do, it's that. If I talk about a fifth, it's that. And sound is made up of different pitches that merge together to give our tonality. And these different pitches come as a result of harmonics. And so here we have a tourist version of a Swiss Alpenhorn. And these are the harmonics. Tom, darling, do you think you might be able to get the monochord from the other room, please? Thank you. Etc. Now, the sounds that we hear comes about through a melding of these different pitches. And that, I don't know whether it's a loose connection or what, but it's very, very annoying because we're not getting the proper sound out of that. Let's put it to the other units. It's okay. It's okay. Well, I put it coming out of there. I think that's fine. Very well. I don't know what's coming out of there. So we have what's known as an 8-foot, which comes about through that note. It's not playing. I'm sorry. Being 8 foot long on an organ. We have a 4-foot. The quint, the 15th, and then the 5th harmonic, and so, wonderful, thank you. I must then move to the old one, the original. And so now you can hear the tonality that is... So the extent to which any of these harmonics are in a sound alters our tonality that we hear. And so piano tone is all about harmonics and the tone that is built up through the construction of these harmonics. Now these harmonics come through when we pluck a string. When we pluck a string can vibrate across the whole of its length, so it will vibrate once, or it will vibrate twice. So. Sorry, this is a toy one. I've asked if my wife can go and find a Victorian one that may well have come from the physicist Helmholtz, who was looking at the construction of sounds. But essentially, a string can vibrate once, or it can vibrate twice, or it can vibrate 3 times, or 4, or 5. And so there are shorter and shorter bits of string that vibrate, and they vibrate at those higher frequencies, those harmonics. Now, if we don't get things in tune, the right things don't happen. Now, this is for the arrival, to announce the arrival of the emir, known as a Kakaki. I can't get that because the mouthpiece is too large. Now, this isn't in tune. It's not in the sort of not in tune that you think it is. Well, the harmonics are not in tune. That's not in tune because this is a thick pipe that's not constructed to resonate properly harmonically, and Martin will probably be able to tell us more about that. But as a result, these harmonics aren't in tune. Those upper harmonics are flat. We'll come on to that in a moment, but this is in tune. Now, it's not in tune in the way you think it is, because you'll think that it's out of tune until something happens. Now, with conventional piano tuning, everything is out of tune and nothing resonates. If we can tune the instrument so that it resonates, yes, we get that magic. Now, because that magic isn't in the sound of the modern tuned piano, Steinways, Bechsteins, Kawais have all gone to a duplex tuning system where you get one length of string in the treble, and then you get another sounding length of string at the top, tuned to an octave and a half or whatever above, that rings. And those things are never in tune. I've only met one instrument where they're in tune, and they ring horribly. They produce this bell-like, hideous, strong sound, and it's all out of tune, and it just rings and it's ugly. But when you get the tuning right, you can get that zing out the sound without all these out of tune bits.
So does that mean when the harmonics?
Because the harmonics are stacking up and resonating, and so you're getting the scale notes to resonate with the harmonics of the bass strings. And when that happens, you get magic out of your piano, as we're going to discover. And I'm very grateful for the toleration and patience of my wonderful musical friends who've been experimenting with me, playing games that I play musically for a long time and suffering my enthusiasm. And today, as a result of them coming together, having made discoveries of having played instruments that I've tuned. And so I'd like to welcome, please, this afternoon we're going to welcome Adolfo and Gary, who are in the back row there at the moment, and I'd like to welcome Zhong Yang and Alexandra and Martin Renshaw. Martin Renshaw, as you've seen your programme, has a long musical tradition, principally, however, in organ building, and I discovered that he was responsible for the experiments behind the publications that inspired me as a teenager with organs. Then it wasn't for another 20 years or whatever that I realised that it was relevant to pianos. But others have trodden this path before, and that is really interesting because the fact that others have trodden this path before independently suggests, and come to the same conclusions, suggests that there's something valid that we ought to be listening to, because repeatedly one or other of us in the musical world discovers these things, and everybody just looks as though we're off the wall. So I've mentioned in the recording resources in this leaflet, which I hope you'll take, so there's a leaflet that goes with the programme today, the work of Enid Catan, a wonderful pianist who recorded Beethoven in the Temperaments, and she recorded another CD called 6 Degrees of Tonality in different tunings. And Ed Foote, who writes on the British Piano Tuners Association website, he's in America, but he was tuning 20 years ago for those recordings. Other modern tuners, there's another one called Bill Bremer, who hasn't been quite adventurous enough to put things into really strong tunings, but he's done things so they beat differently and that sort of thing. And I'm going to, no doubt, not include all of my forebears who have trodden this path before, but another current enthusiast is Carl Radford, and his recordings on YouTube are very interesting. And there are one or two others who have been doing this, and no one's listening, because the music trade seems to be on an express train into boredom. And classical music is not really being taught properly in schools. Budgets are being cut, and they're being cut because it's been reduced to an entertainment. Is that note in the right place? We don't need to worry about what it sounds like. It's just got to be mechanically correct, and it's a technical challenge. And so there are some people who learn the piano as a technical challenge, and when they've played the whole of the Mozart sonatas or whatever as a technical challenge, they've done it. They can move on and go off to some other hobby. They don't understand, because the music, the tuning, isn't communicating, that this is a language of emotion. This is an expression of emotions and feelings that is just as powerful as the language of Shakespeare. But we're losing that, we've lost that raison d'etre for music and equal temperament by putting every note to the mathematical construct of a 12th root of 2 apart, every note exactly the same distance apart, has meant that it is a mechanical sound that comes out of the mechanics of mathematics. Logarithmic mathematics is not human. It's not to do with resonances. It's not to do with harmonics. And as a result, the music that was written for such tuning systems isn't conveying the emotions. Now, we're going to hear a lot of examples today where we will hear the music conveying emotions. There's a problem with a day like today because it's short, and I've probably overrun time already. But the problem is that we're used to 4-bar snippets or 2-second snippets. People have a limited attention span. They have limited time. And of course, in a small slot of time, one judges, oh, does that sound nice? Or does it not sound nice? Or one's judging things by the wrong criteria. It's only by hearing a whole piece from beginning to end to discover the story of what the piece is communicating. And you can't tell the story in a tiny little snippet. So when we experience a temperament in a tiny little slot, all we can say is, oh, does that sound nice or not? We don't say what's it trying to convey. So that is the disadvantage, and I urge you to go away and listen to things recorded in unequal temperaments to find more the story. And some of you who are pianists know pieces that you have found the story in by reason of the tuning, and it's wonderful to see you here today. So I'd like to introduce Jeong-Young, Alexandra and Martin. Do come. And before we do, before we start talking, we might make reference to Pianotech, and I might fiddle over here to get a speaker working or find out what's not happening over here. Pianotech is an electronic system where, and you can see on the screen here, where one can change the pianos that are modelled and synthesised electronically, and we can change the temperament and it gives us a picture of how things are moved and so on. So this electronic simulation from Pianotech is really, really helpful in not replacing a piano, but in saying, well, what if we tuned whichever piano or whatever to another tuning system? What might it sound like? What might we expect? And that's really helpful. When we transfer from the electronic simulation to the real instrument, we'll find that the electronic simulation is wonderfully good, but the resonances of the real instrument with the real strings are fuller, more complex, and it's in that complexity that the tuning has even more importance. So, sorry, I put a light over here and everybody's in darkness. The light's been turned. Such is life.
No,
Such is life. So anyway, I'd like to welcome Martin. Yes, now we've got... The programme's disappeared.
a fairly short...
Right, we've got a fairly short introduction to things. So it's now 20 past, and so I wonder if perhaps each of you might take 5 minutes to introduce yourselves and introduce where you come from, and introduce and then start to see where experience comes together and where you all find common ground. So welcome, Martin, Alexandra, Zhongyang. Thank you very much indeed for coming.
Shall I start?
Yes, why not?
Right. Well, I seem to be the oldest, so slightly. So I'll start at the beginning. The beginning for me was as a professional singer at the age of 9 in St Paul's Cathedral. And I'm going to tell you something surprising about that in just a minute, because we're talking about unequal temperaments as a sort of background to today. But of course, actually there are two things really that can't be tempered mechanically, and one is the voice, and the other are unfretted stringed instruments. But of course, we started with the voice, because long ago, before any sort of instruments, even doing that on the cave wall, came in, we had voices, and we were making sounds. So that's where it all starts. In our own era, which takes up, in fact, song from the Near East, from Greek and other sources, of course, even Egyptian, I suspect, and probably African too. In our own era, the main sound that people created on an organised basis was plain song. It's unfortunate, I've always thought, that it's called plain song, because it's nothing plain about it whatever. It is normal song that you would sing. It's in fact unbelievably complicated. And if any of you have actually tried to convert from singing modern music to plain song, you'll find out how difficult it is, because it's so far removed from the way we go about things. It's so unsystematized, in one sense. It's totally unstandardized. Plain song, as you know, is a series of scales that start, if you have to think of it in modern terms, on different notes of a white keyboard, the white notes of a keyboard. But what it's essentially about is distributing what we now call whole tones and smaller half tones, roughly, in different ways according to the scale. That's what differentiates one mode from another. But there's nothing else that is fixed. And that's not fixed either, because what those tones and what those semitones are is not fixed. Nor is the pitch. Of course, you can sing any given piece of plain song at any pitch. And why would you want to do that? Because every building resounds to a different pitch. So while a piano has its own resonance box, and that's adapted to the pitch that the piano is expected to play at, so you adapt as a singer to the building you sing in. So no fixed pitch. Every cathedral, every large church is different. That's the background against which we're talking. And I could talk to you about this for 3 hours, and I'm not going to. The second thing I want to say is that against that background, England has been the land of song, and until the Reformation was the top land of song. We were doing unbelievably complicated music because plain song started to be embellished. Another line was put to it, and another line was added to that, and until you get 12 lines all going at once. Of course, you get the famous things in the middle of the 1500s, like Spe Menalium of Thales, and which was actually based on some Italian models that went not just to 40 parts, but to 60 or even 80. Yeah. Think of it. Now, that was unbelievably complicated music. So, David, I must just carry on because I'm just trying to go into this. So, the background is song, and song is not fixed. But the moment you get polyphony, you have to start tuning one voice to another. Otherwise, it just sounds a total mess. But then singers do that. You all have probably sung in some sort of choir where someone sings out of tune and everybody adapts to it, and the choirmaster gets annoyed. He gets annoyed with the whole choir. He should be getting annoyed with that person. But in fact, he gets annoyed with the whole lot because they naturally drift with it. And it's always very difficult in an ensemble, whether you're playing violins, string quartet, or you're singing, to maintain some sort of pitch. The pitch will vary from one part to another, measured strictly. But that's perfectly natural.
Martin,
And
sorry to interrupt,
sorry, yeah.
but the important part of this
Yeah.
is that when you're all singing together, you're getting perfect intervals.
Well, that's about
and
to say,
those
yes.
perfect intervals are on the harmonics.
Generally speaking, yes,
And
they have to be.
I've just managed to find the loose connection in this,
Yeah.
so that we can demonstrate
Right.
the way in which in tune and out of tune harmonics have an enormous difference.
Yes, well, that would be a good thing. This is the reason that string quartets and vocal ensembles pitch will bound to vary, because it's constantly trying to shift around to try to keep in tune. But the other thing is that we have a very good memory. And actually, most people will, if they are not knocked off course completely, will tend to start a piece of music and finish it at pretty well the same pitch, even though they might have gone through absolutely everywhere to get from A to B. I was singing just the other day a Salve Regina, which probably took 7 minutes, and I was on my own in a big Lincolnshire church. And I think I did finish at the same pitch I ended on, but it went through, it was in a mode, but it went through even some lyric semitones and things which changed the mode to some extent. Second thing I want to say, as a chorister at St Paul's Cathedral, I was taking part in a very interesting experiment, which it's only just dawned on me, that the organ at St Paul's and in many other cathedrals, because it was built by a firm called Willis, was never tuned in equal temperament. Willis and Cavaillé-Coll in Paris both hated equal temperament and said so to each other, but never publicly, because, of course, they were swimming against the grain. Willis continued, and his firm continued, right up to the present day. Warning, if you buy an organ from Willis's, you're not going to get an organ with equal temperament. You get the Willis temperament, which is a very interesting temperament I haven't got time to go into. But what I'm saying is that in at least half the cathedrals in England, they were singing with organs that were not equal temperament. I have just lent an organ to Christ Church, Oxford, because they've moved up into the choir out of the nave, and they've been singing with an organ for the last 5 months without knowing it, that is not in equal temperament. It's not in Willis's temperament either. It's in my version of one of Young's temperaments. But we can go into that in more detail. The third thing, and I shall shut up after about 45 seconds, is that tuning temperaments is not a result. It's a process. Now, if you tuned organs without any means of changing the length of a pipe after it was made, voiced and tuned, in other words, you take a freshly made pipe which is overlong because you've got to cut it down gradually to the right pitch, which was the way that all organs were tuned until 100 years ago, well, 120 years ago nearly now, when tuning slides started to come in where you could actually change the length of the pipe. You have to know what order to do these pipes in. Otherwise, you land up with a pipe that's too short. As sure as eggs is eggs, you're going to do that. So it's a process which organ builders had to learn to get to a certain goal. And it's the same now. It's a process. We now have tuners. Everyone always oboists come into concerts and pianists and harpsichords come in with these bloody things. They say, oh, that's not the F sharp I thought it was on my Japanese phone. Forgive, sorry. Or Chinese these days, probably.
It's okay.
And then the point, well, Korean, even, yes, the point is, we're not aiming for that. We're aiming to try to give the right general temperament regarding the music and the instrument itself, and the music that's going to be played, that is, and the instrument itself, to give the best results that will colour the music. Let the emotion shine through the music. Let the music be seductive, which is what music is, and surprising. Two most important things about music is they should surprise and seduce. And if it never does that, then we're dead from the neck upwards. So it's a process.
Able to do that.
It's a process, not a result. So you can aim for the same temperament and you can get different results. But that result should suit the instrument and should suit the music. And I've found if you try to impose a temperament on an organ that doesn't want it, it will simply refuse it. It will never sound right. You have to find out what it wants and go that way. So I'd like that to be borne in mind, as I say. We're so used now to taking standardized tuners, whether they're equal temperament or non-equal temperament, that we think that that is the result we've got to get. We haven't. We've got to get something round that. They're systems, they're processes, they're not a fixed result. I'm going to shut up now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've now got our electronics working, and so I can now demonstrate the function of harmonics within the organ sounds.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to choose a stop, which is the bottom 8-foot pitch. And you can hear within that sound, can you hear, oh?
It is the third.
You can hear that harmonic
And the fifth.
within that sound. I'm now going to add the sesquialter, which is a quint and a tierce. So it's the fifth and it's the third and the fifth harmonic. So here we come. And I'm going to add the note, the scale, and you'll hear it beating. Now, there's a difference here because we're using an organ where we are pushing out the sound. When we're tuning a piano, we are pushing out one sound in one string, but receiving it in another and resonating. And this is why resonance in the piano is as important as that kakaki trumpet. So, whilst I'm going to play, I'm not asking you to listen to those two tones, but I'm asking you to think how they resonate on the piano. So this is how pianos are normally tuned, in equal temperament, where the fifth harmonic beats against the scale. And piano tuners are very particular to make sure that these beats increase gradually as they go up the scale, and it has to be perfect. And if it's not, they're a bad tuner. There is another way. I sound like Tony Blair, don't I?
And there's the problem. As you go up, it gets faster.
Now, I'm going to demonstrate. Hello. How lovely to see you, Katrina.
Hi.
May we welcome Katrina Burnett, who is primarily responsible for the start of many people's obsessions, because at Finchcock's, Dick and she were promoting, let's look at music played on original instruments. And without that, we wouldn't necessarily have got onto the idea of let's look at music played in original tunings. So I'm now going to change tuning so that we'll go to the most extreme tuning, which is mean tone. And mean tone is lovely because it has beautiful pure thirds in 8 keys. 4 keys are unusable, which is why Bach did not like mean tone. However, it's sweet. So we hear there the way in which that harmonic is part of the sound and it's in tune.
And it's still sweet at the top,
Yes,
where the previous tune was.
that's right, because there are far fewer beats,
Yes.
in other words, far less
So-
interference.
When we're looking at resonating on the piano, those notes will resonate and it will build sound. Now, where those notes are away, it's so far away, that sounds nasty. But on the piano, it doesn't, because that doesn't resonate. It's not there. And so we use tunings ideally between equal temperament and that extreme so that we can play in all keys. So that's the idea of this. But perhaps now you've heard the harmonics. I'm going to press that note down there. This is an F. And they're all resonating. I'm then going to go up to F sharp, where that note is out and it's dead. It's stopped resonating. So, and that out of tune one isn't there, so it doesn't contribute to the resonance. So it means that it pulls the whole instrument into a resonance, and when we change key, it's a different tonality as different harmonics are brought into that resonance, and it's an exact resonance. And when I play the last note of the first Mozart Sonata second movement, it always sounded as though I was playing that note, but I wasn't. But it's there within the sound. When we play that in equal temperament, it is not within the sound because it's beating, so we don't hear it there so much. Have I persuaded you, or is that an unpersuasive?
Just dead the sound, actually.
It's dead, yes. And so these are the sort of, this is a focused sonic introduction about what we're going to hear next from Alexandra and Zhongyang.
Hi.
Now, Zhongyang has come to our tuning at Hammerwood from a new point of view because she came here once playing Prokofiev. Alpunyo, oh dear, oh dear. Well, I promise you, our tuning didn't do any damage to Prokofiev, did
I
it?
don't know.
But you'll get-
I'm just pianist. I play piano all my life. But I've always loved piano sound, music sound, piano sound in particular. For me, it's quite special. I've played on all sorts of pianos because you can't take obviously your piano with you. You have to play the piano that's in the halls. Or in the gymnasiums, in a little upright, whatever's out of tune. You know, you just have to play and do your best. I'm not sort of pianist who demands perfect tuning when I go to concert because it feels to me as though piano can do many things, even with perfect. You know, it has got to in tune somehow, but you can make beautiful music. I think that's the point. But after also meeting David here and performing some stuff and just getting to know all these instruments, and David telling about Kernberger, Kellner, all these piano tech. It's amazing. It's like amazing toy. I can hear why it's important to have different tuning, because it does affect. It seems to affect different pieces that I play in a different way. It might bring out something that I've been looking for better, or because I don't know much, scientific things about tuning, but I can hear which one I like. If I play a piece, well, okay, I choose this piano, or if I'm playing this, I'd like to do it on that piano. I'm quite strong in my opinion on which one I rather play than not. So, yeah, it's been quite interesting journey so far. That's why I'm here.
And what we've been able to do at Hammerwood with lots of different instruments is to provide a piano laboratory almost, trying different things, different sounds and so on. And over the years, I've been tuning this way for, 12, 15 years. And it's been a journey, as Martin said. And always when you go to a concert hall or you listen to the radio, we are stuck with this fixed version of tuning. And I'm going to demonstrate that later on. I'm going to demonstrate what that tuning sounds like and what the worst of our unequal tuning sounds like. And we found one tuning that is capable of being used relatively universally, which doesn't do any damage to the repertoire. And that's very important, because we can use mean tone, but we either have to understand it, and I can't remember who's going to play what, but I know somebody's going to play yes, I think Gary's going to play the Haydn F minor variations. Oh dear, F minor, the key of desolation and despair, associated of course with A flat major, which is the key of putrefaction and death. Yes, well, that's really well demonstrated by this instrument that Martin Renshaw tuned a very long time ago.
6 years ago.
There's F minor, dark despair, and there's A flat major. Oh, that's putrefaction, isn't it? A minor sounds the sun shines out of it. We're going to experience different instruments in these different tunings. We've got the 1802 Stoddart, which came from Katrina's collection at Finchcock's, and that's tuned in mean tone. It tunes really well in another temperament, but it's a good instrument to put into mean tone. We've got the 1905 Broadwood over there, which is tuned in an experimental Chopin temperament, which an American professor has devised, who says, this is wonderful Chopin. Adolfo likes it very much. I don't, because tuning it, I can't get it to resonate. And that's the problem with this instrument over here. It's a baby grand chapel. The Broadwood is a baby grand. It tunes very beautifully to an unequal temperament. But that chapel is just what you'd expect in a hotel foyer. And it's tuned to hotel foyer tuning. And the equal temperament makes it sound warm and fuzzy. And because it's fuzzy, as John Young sort of remarked, don't mind out-of-tune pianos because you can still make music on them or whatever. When you've got something that's fuzzy, it doesn't really matter how fuzzy it is because it's still fuzzy. And so because it's fuzzy, you don't really notice how out of tune it is. But when you have a tuning which is built to resonate, you notice that it's in tune and it shines. And then you notice that it's out of tune and you ring up your piano tuner, my piano's come out of tune, can you come and do it? So if piano tuners can take on an unequal temperament which resonates, there's more business and there's more excitement in the music that we hear. And so over at the end of the room there, we've got the 1885 Bechstein, which I'm very careful about. I haven't altered the tuning on it significantly for a dozen years or whatever. It's tuned to a Kellner temperament. It has 7 perfect fifths. And that really shines. And you might hear it and say, oh, wonderful piano. Oh, it's a wonderful tuning. It's the tuning that resonates. You can have the most wonderful piano you like, but if it's not tuned to resonate, it won't shine. Then in the hall, we've got a tuning that is slightly stronger than the Bechstein. It's Kernberger 3, which is sort of towards mean tone from that, and we'll hear that. That instrument, 1859, was on hire to Sir Charles Halley, and a member of the audience at the concert said, that's the most amazing piano I've heard in my life, I must buy it, and paid 250 guineas for it in 1859. So that's an interesting instrument. Now, Alexandra here comes to unequal temperament, partly from Hammerwood, but partly from the repertoire that you started to play.
Hey, hello everyone. So my journey started in Bulgaria, where I'm from. And I was studying piano from a child, and I always loved the Baroque repertoire, and I was sort of learning how to do it. And then years later, I was in music college learning this Bach piece, and I was sort of experiencing, so I'm wanting for more, for direction. So I don't know how many of you who play the Prelude and Fugues in your own in your own time, and especially the fugue, so just sort of it's very difficult to find how you want it to sound and just to kind of find that meaning. And my teacher, my organ teacher, which I was learning secretly at the time because I didn't want to upset my piano teacher, she said, why don't you try this? So she switched a magic button on the organ, which I think went to Mitteltone, which I believe is the German for mean tone. And it felt like I went through the looking glass, it's like this wonderland of sounds, and I could sort of take as much as I could and then switch it off and try to remember where I wanted the music to go. And a sort of wonderful sense of direction sort of I kept it from then. And nowadays I sort of switched mostly to playing the harpsichord, and this is quite lucky because we always use slightly unequal temperament. So Velotti is a much milder version of the ones that we have here, which kind of works for ensemble work, but still quite spicy enough for solo music. But I feel it's a very interesting sort of thing to experiment with and to kind of find different meanings in.
So, shall we start to look at some of the repertoire that you brought with you? Alexandra's going to play things that are in here, and then
That's
you can take them
lovely.
outside to be uncomfortable, and we'll put some chairs around or whatever. But it won't hurt also just to start one or two things on the equal temperament piano. And this piano, I don't like the bass of it, but that's another matter. The tone of it in the centre is still very nice, and to the extent that I enjoy playing it. And so, when we compare tunings, of course, we have problems because we're listening to it on different instruments. But that's not so different in a way. And one of the beauties is that when we notice something that we hear on the equal temperament hotel foyer piano, when we want to, when we think that we hear a difference with another instrument, we can then go to the electronic simulation and test it on the two temperaments. And so we might well do that in the lunch break, or later on this afternoon in tea break, or afterwards, or whatever. And our problem is that we're fitting into a day here what otherwise we could probably take in 3 days with each person taking different nuanced subjects. So Alexandra, what have you brought with you to play? Apart from my jumping on you and 2 days in advance and saying, oh, what about this?
Oh,
Oh,
so,
yes.
so David has literally emailed me this piece yesterday, and it's quite a tricky piano piece, so I'm not even going to attempt to sort of perform, but I will give some examples of sounds just to sort of kind of see what's happening. So as a performer, I've always been very fascinated by the idea of making the piano sound like sort of finding the many worlds that the piano can contain, because it's it could be quite a standard nice sound, but it also has this massive capacity to be the king of the instruments, to have a whole orchestra. And with this sort of comes the storytelling with playing, and I find that certain things, certain elements can be amplified through resonance. So, David, what would you like me to start with?
Whatever you fancy playing.
Okay. So,
Whilst you're thinking, this is the real monochord. And you can see here equal temperament notes marked at one end and just intervals on the other, with 2 notes between G and F, F sharp and G flat, and even E sharp and F flat. So that's quite interesting to have a look at later on. So, have you come to your decision?
so should I perform or sort of demonstrate bits?
It's open to you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I will start with a little sonic exploration of the piano in the room with a piece by John Cage called Dream. So I'm just going to try to sort of journey through the room and see what's happening. Then I'm going to play a piece from the Renaissance period by the composer's Jean Peterson's Feeling, which is it's a type of music that doesn't often get performed on the piano. It's much more sort of historical performance ground. Mainly because it does sound a little bit bland when you play it, just ever so slightly. I mean, there's more exciting things to play on the piano. But actually, I'm really I love the idea of salvaging this repertoire and sort of being able to play it on the piano. So this is an arrangement of Dowland's The Flow My Tears, so arranged for keyboard. And then I would like to play a piece by Debussy in the end. But Debussy was also known to like to explore different sonorities. So there's a popular story that he was very fascinated by visiting Gamelan Orchestra when he was young, and he heard it and then sort of stayed with him. So he was always into sort of weird resonances and pursuing different sounds. So I'm going to play again quite a piece with kind of that inspiration from Images No. 2. Okay.
Now, I was in the car the other day, a week ago, and I heard some Chaminade played on the radio, and colour was being discussed in music, and I hope that today we've heard some colour that came out of the Sweeling, which transferred beautifully into Debussy and into modern things as well. And I heard this piece by Chaminade, the Etude Pathétique, and I just thought, oh dear, it's grey, it needs the colour. And so I asked if somebody amongst our performers could just do something. And I'm afraid it's a hideously difficult piece, so sight reading is out, but Alexandra's going to play some excerpts.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's a piece marked presto, energico, appassionato. So it will be more on the side of andantino, comodo. Shall we play the slow bit?
Would you like to play that on the equal temperament?
Okay, yeah. Okay. I've never actually played this piano, so it's new.
It came out of the barn. It was really going to go on a bonfire. And it came out of the barn last week, and I thought we'd better revive it. So can we go to the slow piece there,
Okay.
and then go back to there?
Okay, I will need the rest of the music though. So, yeah, it's really this Kravinesque section that we sort of chose earlier this morning.
David, can I just say a word before this, very quickly, while we arrange the chairs?
Well, I think we're ready,
Well,
yes.
When I was talking about Plainsong, I meant to go on to one thing which is so important. This Plainsong was sung in buildings, and each of those buildings is different. You go from one cathedral to another, one major church to another. They're arranged differently. They have different acoustics. And one thing I've learned as a singer, only in the last few years, and it's from singing in Italian cathedrals, and one in particular, where Pope Gregory VII was actually born, and he was the one who regulated Plainsong for the whole of Western Europe. So it's not surprising that cathedral is wonderful for singing. But you have to find the pitch of the building. And what I was going to say was that when organs started to come into churches, at that point you had to start systematizing, because Plainsong would, if you calculate all the notes through the octave that Plainsong would compass, you're up to 66 in an octave. Well, you've only got a few fingers, so eventually the keyboard came to 12 notes somehow or other. And organs coming into churches in the 15th century started to systematize them. But of course, there was no fixed pitch. So we've not only got with Plainsong a complete universe of sounds and pitches available to us, which are fitting into the building. And the buildings themselves are building up harmonics and making the Plainsong into harmony. Because if you sing intervals in Plainsong, they will carry on in the building, which you then have to tune into for the next note, and so on and so on and so on. It's like singing with a quartet, but it's not a quartet, it's the building that's singing with you, you see. Organs started to systematize them. You can systematize them only to some extent. You can't change the general pitch. The pitch has got to be right for the singers because they're singing 8 hours a day, up to 8 hours a day in the building. They have to let the building do the work for them as well. There's nothing for us to sing in a cathedral, because even in modern days you sing quite a lot there. But organs started to systematize, and we've systematized and systematized and systematized, and into the 19th century we've standardized.
Yeah.
And largely, I'm afraid, it sounds very anti-foreign, but it's largely down to the Germans coming in the latter, with Prince Albert and his cohort, that this country started to systematize things that were never really systematized until then. We had actually an English pitch from 1711, which no other country had, so we could bring instrumentalists together. But how we tuned the instruments and so on was not systematized. So we've been on a long trail of gradually taking something that was very open and fluid into gradually channeling it. And we've tried to channel all the music that's been produced in the world into that one channel. And what we're trying to do now, we've tried in little ways for the last 20 years, is to try and open this world out. Not only how it's tuned, how we hear it, but how we play it too, because nothing is set in concrete. As far as organists are concerned, they ought to be aware that most of Bach's organ works come down to us as copies from pupils. And they're copies possibly from a performance that Bach made, which wouldn't be different from another performance Bach made. So nothing is gospel. Well, as students of the Bible know, the Gospels aren't gospel either.
Right.
So there's my thoughts.
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much indeed. What is really interesting is that I think we've heard how that tuning that we've heard starting to unsystematize what we've experienced. And this instrument is tuned to Kernberger 3, which still has 7 perfect fifths, but has them arranged in a different place, which then means it puts what is interesting about mean tone is that C and C sharp are close together. And the tuning we used in the other room puts those into a major and a minor semitone, which is a 1/9 of a tone apart. And this puts the C sharp closer. So we've got a narrow C sharp to C, we've got a narrow F to F sharp. And it's preserved that aspect of mean tone, which means that when we don't like the strength of mean tone, we can come into the world of Kernberger 3 and still play it almost as a universally applicable temperament. Much of the music that we've heard so far would be perfectly at home on this temperament too. So may I, with great pleasure, introduce John Young to come and enlighten us.
I chose some pieces. I have Mozart, Fantasia, Fantasy rather. I could start with that. Now I've also got Berg Sonata that's about 10 minutes long. I think it must be one of his first compositions. Don't worry, it's not 12 tones. It's very romantic, but it does have a lot of semitones. It seems to work well on this piano, so we chose to play on this one. Right. Start with Mozart first. that was quite almost Liszt in Mozart, isn't it?
It is. Let's try that way.
So, and now to Alban Berg Sonate, Opus 1. And we found this interesting on the piano tech because it sounded quite pure. The notes, the sequence of the melodies sounded much better on this temperament than on a chapel.
On a hotel for a piano.
Well.
What happens is, in particular, the eighth harmonic is 3 octaves above. It is 3 octaves above the fundamental note, and there's a note above that. So if you're playing the bottom C, on some pianos, that D will actually be in tune and it won't vibrate. Oh, it's wonderful. And you get these harmonies out of what appear to be discords, and the tuning just brings them together in a most beautiful way. Whereas on equal temperament, it constantly rings, and the constant beat of the no pedal. Did you notice beats in that? Some of the intervals were very pure and some of them were beating. And so this is where we talk about colour. The chromatic scale isn't. No, it is that scale that I've just said. Chromatic is colour. It's not colour we can see, but when we see a rainbow in the sky, we see separated out the different colours, the different vibrations. And as we go up the chromatic scale now, we experience the range of different vibrations, the whole spectrum of different vibrations, and then we get the colour. And so the beauty is that with an equal temperament piano, the German manufacturers in particular, this instrument doesn't have, I can just hear the 5th harmonic, but it has much more of the 3rd harmonic. There's virtually none of that. Whereas on the industrially made pianos from the 1870s onwards, you get much more of the 5th harmonic, and the idea of equal temperament and the constant raising of frequency of the beats as you go up the scale in the major thirds is that 5th harmonic beats against the scale note, and as a result we play the instrument and it glistens and it shimmers, and then we say, oh, what a wonderful instrument, it must be a brand name. Oh, how wonderful is this brand name. And we're seduced by the brand name pianos rather than how well they can express, deliver the music. And so this was where actually Broadwoods lost popularity because they didn't take on the 5th harmonic to the same extent. So they sounded somewhat duller, and the other fashionable instruments came through. And by going back to the tunings which move that 5th harmonic, we can actually change the sound of these industrial produced brand name pianos to express the music, and they'll still glisten and they'll still show off as instruments, but in a different way and in a wonderful way. And so by coming back to this instrument, by the way, this instrument comes from the Katrina's Finchcock's collection. It was one of their favourite instruments. And so thank you very, very much indeed, when you retired, for making instruments available to other places. By going back to the original instruments and hearing the way in which the structure of the sound has changed when we tune them, we're now able to say, yes, after the 1870s, we got more fifth harmonic. Before the 1870s, there was much less of it. It was the third harmonic which was important. And it's this that gives us an indication that tuning changed. So, Berg.
Okay.
enlightening. Historic temperaments are not just for Baroque. Historic temperaments are for modern music. And thank you both of you today for demonstrating that so superbly. Now we've got about 2 minutes for questions. I'm sure there are lots of questions. But now is a time when perhaps you might fire something off for us to think about over lunch.
Could I ask a question? When you said the 1870s, the focus changed from the third to the fifth harmonic, could you amplify what that means in terms of actual construction or...
Yes. The fifth harmonic is... So that's first, fundamental note, second, third, fourth, fifth. So the sound changed from emphasising the third, and on this bass note I can hear a bit of the fifth. Let's go up to the F. I can't hear any of the A. It's not there. But on a complete steel framed instrument that came in after the 1870s, and obviously they were starting to come in or whatever, but I've only experienced pre-1860 and post-1880, so I don't know what happened in the middle. But when you're tuning, you notice much more of this fifth harmonic right the way through the scale as one's tuning.
Do you know what it is that causes that in the later design?
Yes, it's where the hammer hits the string, and essentially where a string vibrates. If you a string that is vibrated here can vibrate in any of those modes as such. If we hit the string right in the middle, then it can't vibrate twice because there's a nothing in the middle. So if we hit it at the point of the node of the harmonic, it can't vibrate. Now, and I'm aware of breaking into lunch, but this is quite important because piano tuning is complicated by these harmonics being out of tune. And so this instrument, I use an electronic instrument, and I was a tuner to help me. Makes things faster, makes things accurate. It also makes things repeatable, which is great. And I was testing out some new software on a mobile phone or whatever, which has a curve on it, which shows how out of tune the harmonics are. And this one's nearly flat right the way through. But you'll find that that note on many instruments is sharp, some of them are flat or whatever. And so what the piano tuning does is to, if that is slightly sharper, whatever, we tend to tune that note, we tend to tune this note to the second harmonic of that note. So when we tune it without beats, so we will find that the inharmonic, the stretching in the frequencies, the strings, means that we stretch our octaves. Now, when we stretch our octaves, the reason for this is thought to be because the strings aren't infinitely thin, like a harpsichord, so they're not perfect resonators, they're thick, so they behave more like bars of metal than they do strings. And it's for this reason that piano strings are inherently out of tune, but there's another factor at play. Last night I was tuning the 1819 Broadwood. We're celebrating its bicentenary this year upstairs, and I hope you'll go and somebody might play it later on this afternoon. And that has thin strings like harpsichord strings, but I found that those harmonics were out of tune too. And the reason for that is because at one end you've got a fixed point near the hammer, and it's known as an agraff or staple or whatever, which fixes the string. And at the other end, you've got a bridge which connects the string to the soundboard, and then the string goes on to the end of the hitch pin where it's held. Now, there's a funny phenomenon that when you tune all 3 strings of a note, because there are 3 strings to every note, all of the strings are vibrating in the same way, which then means that the soundboard becomes part of the vibration. So with the soundboard jumping up and down, at the point where the string should be stopping vibration, it's not. So effective, because it's still jumping up and down there, which therefore means that the length is lengthened beyond the bridge. Now, the big energy is in that fundamental vibration, the big note, the big vibration at the bottom, and the harmonics are just superimposed on top. The subharmonics are faster, and because they're faster, they will need more acceleration for things, and a big heavy bridge isn't going to accelerate that fast, so it's much more stiff to the string. And not only that, but these harmonics, which are superimposed upon that bottom vibration, have less energy, so they don't vibrate the bridge at all as much. So therefore, we've got one length of string beyond the bridge, which is giving us our fundamental note, and a shorter length of string between our agraff and our bridge, which is giving us our harmonics. It's for that reason that our low note is more than an octave below the second harmonic. It's for this reason that the strings are out of tune. So the modern tuning system has come about to make everything sort of nice and equal. So we have nice equal octaves or whatever, so that the instrument is tuned to its own inharmonics. So that's why it's bright and whatever, you see. And the way in which these historical temperaments work is to give us nice clean intervals, which are mathematically related to the scale, to the just scale, to the harmonics. So these historical temperaments give us this close harmony. And the notes, the fundamental notes, are in tune with themselves, with the harmony. Then we tune, so I do that between those 3 octaves. So those 3 octaves are tied to the proper vibration ratios between the notes, which gives us our tight harmony, and then the bass we then tune to the harmonics, which might be inharmonic, they might be out of tune, but it doesn't matter because we just want everything to be nice and still and in tune. So that's the method I do that. And then the top, of course, one wants that note not to beat against that note. Well, with the treble, good luck to anybody who can manage it. I try my best. But it's in this way that these instruments are tied to the harmony of the music rather than the inharmony that the piano strings produce. And this idea can be applied to modern pianos. And Didier over there has a Kawai, and it was horribly harsh, and we had a concert and there were lots of people in not a huge room, but anyway, it was a bit painful on the ears, and I came and tuned it. I sat down and I looked at this very shiny, wonderful black instrument that was tuned in equal tempo perfectly. Oh dear, what am I going to be doing to this? Anyway, I tuned it, and the next concert everybody said how wonderful it was, because it wasn't ringing, it wasn't sharp, harsh. And then I tuned a Steinway A in France, and Adolfo was with me, and he said to me, "Oh, congratulations, you've ruined a Steinway, you've turned it into a Play-O." I hadn't ruined it, of course, it just sounded nice and sweet.
It's funny you said about Play-O. Play-O's sales in France, of all places, dipped from the 1860s onwards because of the German instruments coming in with all their shimmer and glimmer. So the Chopin piano disappeared at that point from France, or beginning to.
It's very, very